When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me right in the eye and said, with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. Me, the woman who, for 3 years, had paid their $500 monthly rent, bought every piece of furniture in their home, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not special. I stood there in the living room of my own house, phone heavy in my hand as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the very sofa I'd bought for them. The pale pink dress I'd picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the fragile illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I'd spent $200 on that dress, imagining how I'd look in Max's wedding photos I would never appear in. For weeks, I'd planned every detail. I'd set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift. I'd called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the good news. I'd scrubbed my house from top to bottom, hoping they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of it, shattered in a single sentence. Only special people. Max finally lifted his eyes and said, in a voice that sounded rehearsed, "Mom, it was intimate, just the two of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I'd seen the photos on social media, Lena's parents beaming beside the bride and groom, her siblings raising champagne flutes, her white dress, the one I'd helped pay for with the $800 I'd given her last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't meant to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called again. But this time, her voice was different, no longer confident, now desperate, almost pleading. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled, as if the world were ending. I stayed silent for a few heartbeats, remembering all the times I'd rushed to the bank to send that money, all the times I'd canceled my own plans so they'd have a roof, all the beans and rice I'd eaten so they could afford their wants. And now, after erasing me from their wedding, they dared to call, as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "Didn't I warn you? I only help special people." The silence on the other end was so deep I could hear my own pulse. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling. "Renata, I don't understand. We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me, Lise. All of it." Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she'd used to ask for money for the dress, the rings, the honeymoon I'd never see. For years, I'd walked on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, just hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I'd been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But those 4 words, only special people, woke something in me that had been buried for far too long. I sat down and calculated it all. Rent. $500 times 36 months equals $18,000. Groceries, $200 times 36 equals $7,200. Gifts, $3,000. Medical emergencies, $800. Car loan they never repaid, $2,500. Air conditioner repair, $600. Furniture, $1,200. Total, $33,400. That was the price of my generosity, money from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from decades of honest work, all of it gone, to keep 2 adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang. Max's name flashed on the screen. Normally, my heart would race. I'd sprint to answer, hoping for an apology. Not this time. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence. 10 minutes later, Lena called. I let it ring again, then a text from Max. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted it without replying. At 2 p.m., I went for a walk, Not to run an errand, not to buy them something, but simply because I wanted to. I passed the park where I used to take Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me and said, "You're the best mom in the world." When had he become this man who saw me as an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I believe I had to buy my son's affection? I stopped in front of the bank, the same branch where I'd made those endless transfers. Mr. Klein, the manager, saw me through the glass and waved. He knew me. He'd watched my account drain month after month. I walked straight into his office. "Mr. Klein, I need to cancel all automatic transfers, and I want to protect my accounts. No one else should have access." He looked stunned. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter?" "Did something happen?" "What happened," I said, "is that I finally opened my eyes." As he processed the cancellations, my phone buzzed again and again. Max, Lena, Max again. I turned it off. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said gently, handing me the paperwork, "I've seen you be very generous with your family over the years. I hope you're not being pressured into this." His concern, real, human, touched me more than any word from my son in months. "I'm not being pressured," I told him. "On the contrary, I finally stopped pressuring myself." When I left the bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. My money was mine again, and for the first time in a long time, I was my own first priority. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Max sat on my sofa, head in his hands. Lena paced like a caged animal, and an older man I'd never seen before was rifling through papers on my dining table. My papers, my bank statements, my private documents. "What is happening here?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. All three turned to me as if I were the intruder. Lena was the first to speak, her voice dripping with that practiced urgency I now recognized too well. "Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" I echoed, calm slicing through the tension. "What situation?" "I'm doing perfectly fine." Max finally looked up, his eyes, once full of childhood wonder, now clouded with panic. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein said you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you'd do that." The man in the gray suit stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Mrs. Richter, I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are deeply concerned about your mental well-being and asked me to assess the situation." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked straight to the table and gathered every document he'd touched. "These are my private papers." "You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom," Max cut in, voice laced with that condescending tone he'd perfected over the years, "we're worried about you. Your behavior has been strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without explanation. Then you ignore our calls. We think you might need professional help." Lena moved closer, reaching for my hand with that saccharine tenderness she reserved for moments of need. "Renata, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal confusion." The words struck like a match to dry tinder. Now I understood why they'd brought a lawyer. This wasn't concern. It was a legal maneuver to declare me incompetent and seize control of what was left of my life. The same woman who told me they'd only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old ghost. "I am not confused," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the room. "I am clearer than I've been in years, and you are going to leave my house." Now Mr. Fisher stepped in, smooth as polished stone. "Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your financial decisions are impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors." "Concerning behaviors?" I laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Like deciding my money belongs to me? Like refusing to fund two adults who treat me like trash?" Lena flinched as if slapped. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was, the raw, unfiltered truth. To them, I was already dead, just a walking inheritance. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you. Get out, Max stood, his face twisting into that petulant scowl he wore as a child when denied candy. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations, the rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed. You can't cut us off like this. Who says I can't? My voice rose for the first time. For years, I paid rent for a home that wasn't mine. I filled a fridge in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that had no place for me. Mr. Fisher pulled a folder from his briefcase. Mrs. Richter, we've prepared documents to ease this transition, a temporary power of attorney so Max and Lena can manage your finances more efficiently until you feel better. Without opening it, I took the folder and dropped it straight into the trash. The only transition happening today is yours, straight out that door. Lena burst into tears, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage. You can't do this to us, Renata. We were counting on you. We made plans, bought things based on your support. Plans based on my money, I corrected. Not my well-being, not my company, just my money. And now that I've decided to keep it for myself, suddenly I'm a confused old woman needing guardianship? Max tried to approach, but I stepped back. This wasn't my son anymore. This was a stranger wearing his face, someone who saw me as an obstacle to comfort. Mom, he pleaded, voice dripping with fake remorse. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable. The word tasted like ash. Being reasonable means letting you erase me from your life while I pay for it. It means pretending it doesn't gut me to be excluded from my only son's wedding. Mr. Fisher began packing his papers, all professionalism now. Mrs. Richter, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If a judge determines you're making irrational decisions due to mental decline, guardianship can be imposed. A chill ran through me. This wasn't just a visit. It was a declaration of war. Mr. Fisher, I said, locking eyes with him, I suggest you research thoroughly before threatening a 71-year-old woman who's managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband died, who worked honorably until retirement, and who, until last week, funded 2 perfectly capable adults. Lena stopped crying. Her mask fell, revealing cold calculation beneath. This won't stay like this, Renata. We have rights. And lawyers. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money. Because mine is no longer available to fund your legal tantrums. They left with the wounded pride of people unused to being told no. At the door, Max turned one last time. Mom, this is going to end badly for you. You'll be alone when you really need someone. Max, I said, voice thick with sorrow but clear with truth. I am already alone. The difference is, now it's by choice, not by your neglect. I closed the door, and for the first time in years, I stood in my living room surrounded by the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Silence. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of freedom. That night, I didn't sleep from sadness. I lay awake on adrenaline, planning my next move like a general preparing for battle. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. Fought with facts, not feelings. At 6 a.m., I was dressed and out the door. My destination, the office of Mr. Weber, my late husband's trusted attorney, a man known for protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them. When I explained everything, the secret wedding, the lawyer's intrusion, the threat of guardianship, Mr. Weber didn't hesitate. Mrs. Richter, what your children attempted yesterday is called elder financial abuse. It's not just unethical, it's a federal crime. And entering your home without permission to access private documents? That's trespassing and invasion of privacy. His words were both a balm and a warning. I wasn't crazy. I was a target. "We'll document everything," he said. "Every transfer, every gift, every pressure tactic, and we'll revise your will immediately to prevent future manipulation." For 3 hours, we combed through my records. When Mr. Weber saw the total, $33,400, he whistled low. "With this money, you could have traveled the world, enjoyed your retirement, lived with dignity. Instead, you bankrolled 2 adults who couldn't even invite you to their wedding." Leaving his office, I had a plan. 1. Change all locks. 2. Install a security system with cameras. 3. Open a new bank account at a different bank. 4. Start living the life I'd postponed for decades. My next stop? The hardware store. Mr. Summer, the owner, greeted me with a knowing look. "Another emergency with your son?" "No," I said firmly. "This time, it's for my house." "I need the best locks you have." His son Ethan, who installed security systems, happened to be there. Providence, I thought. "I also need full surveillance," I told him. "Cameras inside, outside, motion sensors, everything. Price is no object." As they prepared the installation, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. Lena, borrowing someone else's phone since I'd blocked hers. "Renata, please don't hang up. We want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner? Just the 3 of us, like old times?" The manipulation was almost comical. "Lena," I asked flatly, "how much rent do you owe exactly?" Silence. Then, 2 months. $1,000. "And when was the last time you called me just to ask how I was, without asking for money?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Lena," I said, voice steady, "for 3 years you treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, ignored me, humiliated me. And now that the money's gone, you love me again? You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I hung up, turned the phone off. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the salon just for me. Cynthia, my stylist, nearly cried. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes," I said, smiling for the first time in months. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that afternoon, there was a car I didn't recognize parked in front of my house. My heart jumped. Had Max and Lena returned with more lawyers? But as I drew closer, I saw an older woman sitting on my porch steps, holding a steaming mug in her hands. "Mrs. Richter?" she asked as I stepped out of the car. "Yes, that's me. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really talked. Yesterday I heard raised voices in your house, and I got worried. Is everything all right?" Her concern was so genuine, so human, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Here was a stranger who cared more about my well-being than my own son ever had. "Come in, Eleanor," I said, opening the door. "I'll make you some coffee and tell you a story you won't believe." Over coffee, I told her everything. The secret wedding, the $33,400 I'd poured into their lives, the lawyer's intrusion, the threats of guardianship. She listened without interrupting, her eyes soft with understanding. When I finished, she reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. "Mrs. Richter, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I, too, thought it was my duty to fund her adult life. I believed she wouldn't love me if I stopped giving." "What happened?" I asked, leaning forward. "She threatened me. Emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty for abandoning her. But after 6 months of silence, she called, not for money, but to apologize. Now we have a real relationship, not based on what I can give her, but on who I am." Her words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. For the first time, I didn't feel foolish. I felt seen. "Do you think Max and Lena will ever understand?" I whispered. "Maybe," she said honestly. "Maybe not. But that's no longer your responsibility. Your job now is to live your own life." That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Max had paid the rent or if Lena had groceries. I thought only of myself, my peace, my future, my quiet joy, and I slept better than I had in a decade. The next morning, Ethan and his father arrived at 8 a.m. sharp to install the new locks and security system. As they worked, my phone buzzed again and again from unknown numbers. Lena, trying every trick to reach me, but I'd learned a new skill, ignoring what no longer served me. While Ethan mounted the cameras, he explained, "This system sends real-time alerts to your phone. If anyone steps onto your property without permission, you'll know instantly, and the police are notified automatically." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing surveillance to protect myself from my own son. But it didn't hurt like it once would have. It was simply self-preservation, and I deserved that. After they left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Diana in Chicago. "Renata," she answered, stunned. "We haven't spoken in months." "I know," I said softly, "but I've finally come to my senses." I told her the whole story, the wedding, the betrayal, the legal threats. She listened in silence, and when I finished, her voice was gentle but firm. "Sister, it was about time. Every time we talked, you bragged about how much you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. It broke my heart. Then she said something that chilled me. Max never spoke lovingly about you at family gatherings. It was always, 'My mom helped me with this,' or 'My mom bought me that.' Never, 'I miss my mom.' Never, 'I love my mom.' To him, you were a service, not a person. Worse still, Lena always talked about you in the future tense. 'When Renata's no longer here, we'll remodel the house.' Or, 'Once we inherit, we'll start that business.' As if they were just waiting for you to die." I sat frozen in my kitchen, the truth crashing over me like a wave. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their inheritance. Later that afternoon, Eleanor returned, this time with 2 fresh coffees. We sat on my porch watching the sunset, and she shared more of her journey. "They used the same lines on me," she said with a wry smile. "You're like a second mom." "We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." It's all from the same emotional manipulation playbook. "Do you think such a handbook exists?" I asked, half joking. "Not officially," she laughed. "But Chapter 1 is, make her feel indispensable." Chapter 2, create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3, when she resists, question her sanity. We laughed. But it was the bitter laugh of women who'd been played by the very people they loved most. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting them off?" I asked. "Every day for the first 3 months," she admitted. "But then I saw the results." My daughter got a second job. Her husband stopped golfing every weekend and started working overtime. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something long overdue. I visited my husband Robert's grave. I hadn't been in months, always too busy solving Max and Lena's latest crisis. Now the cemetery was quiet, peaceful. I knelt beside his headstone, brushed away the leaves, and spoke to him as if he were right there. "Robert, I think I lost myself after you left. I poured everything into Max, trying to make up for your absence. But in doing so, I forgot who I was." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and steady, like a sigh of understanding. "I spent the money you left me to give me peace, on people who saw me as a burden. But not anymore, my love. I've learned I left fresh flowers and stayed until the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing home to fix someone else's life. I was simply present. But peace, I was learning, is rarely permanent." When I pulled into my driveway that evening, 3 cars were parked out front: Maximum, Lena, and 2 strangers. My stomach dropped, But this time I didn't panic. I stayed in my car and called Mr. Weber. "They're here again," I said calmly. "What do I do?" "Don't get out," he ordered. "I'm calling the police." After yesterday's visit, I filed for a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed on your property. Within minutes, Mr. Weber arrived, followed by 2 patrol cars. I watched from my window as officers approached Max and Lena. Max gestured wildly. Lena cried, performative, desperate tears. One officer came to my car. "Ma'am, you're safe to come out." They're leaving immediately. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, Max shouted, "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." I looked him in the eye, steady, unshaken. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits to declare their mother mentally unfit. Family doesn't break into homes to steal documents. Family doesn't treat their mother like a bank account with feelings. Lena screamed across the street. "You owe us. We have bills you co-signed. You can't just abandon us." Mr. Weber stepped forward, voice sharp as steel. "Any further communication must go through my office, and I suggest you consult a lawyer before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of every voluntary payment she made over 3 years." They drove away, defeated, but not done. That night, Eleanor invited me to dinner. Her daughter was visiting, and I watched them laugh, share stories, ask about each other's lives, without once mentioning money. "I wanted that with Max," I confessed later as we washed dishes. "And maybe you'll get it one day," Eleanor said gently. "But first, he has to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling something new, hope. But hope, like peace, is fragile. 2 days later, a well-dressed woman appeared at my door with a clipboard and a badge. "Good morning, Mrs. Richter. I'm Miss Schmidt, a social investigator from Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be at risk. I'm here for a wellness check." My blood turned to ice. Max and Lena had escalated. Now they were dragging the government into their scheme. "May I see your ID?" I asked, stalling. She showed me official credentials. They looked real. "Of course you may come in," I said. But inside, I was already dialing Mr. Weber. As she sat in my living room and pulled out a form, her questions dripped with subtle poison. "Have you shown signs of paranoia? Have you refused medical or legal help from loved ones? Why did you so abruptly cut off your family?" Every word had been crafted to paint me as unstable. I recognized Lena's hand in the phrasing. She'd always been good with words when she wanted something. "I'd like to call my lawyer before answering further," I said firmly. "This isn't an interrogation," she replied, smiling too sweetly. "If you have nothing to hide." That phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," made my skin crawl. It's what abusers say when they want to justify invasion. "I'm calling my lawyer," I repeated. "You may wait or return later." 20 minutes later, Mr. Weber arrived. He reviewed her credentials, then placed his own file on the table, thick with evidence of financial abuse, trespassing, and emotional manipulation. "Miss Schmidt," he said coolly, "if you proceed without a court order, this becomes harassment. My client is under legal representation." She flipped through his documents, her confidence crumbling. Finally, she looked at me. "Mrs. Richter, do you manage your own finances? I can show you bank statements, tax returns, investment records, all current. Do you live independently? I cook, clean, drive, garden, and maintain friendships. I take vitamins and occasional aspirin. No chronic conditions." Mr. Weber added, "She recently passed a full medical and cognitive evaluation with flying colors." Ms. Schmidt closed her folder. "Based on this conversation and documentation, I see no indication of risk. I'll be closing this case." When she left, Mr. Weber and I sat in silence for a long moment. "Renata," he said finally, "this will escalate. They're desperate. Next, they'll file for legal incompetence." The thought terrified me. But then I remembered Eleanor's words. "Your responsibility now is to live your own life." And I would, no matter what it took. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought the storm had passed. I'd settled into a quiet rhythm, morning coffee with Eleanor, gardening in the afternoons, painting again for the first time in years. I even joined a local art class, something I'd dreamed of doing since Robert passed. But peace, I was learning, is often just the calm before the next battle. On a Thursday morning, as I brushed watercolor onto paper, soft blues and golds for a field of sunflowers, Mr. Weber knocked on my door. His face was grim. "Renata," he said without preamble, "Max and Lena have filed a formal petition in family court. They're asking a judge to declare you mentally incompetent and appoint a legal guardian, Max, to control your finances." The brush slipped from my fingers. My own son was trying to legally erase me. "They can't do that," I whispered. "They can," Mr. Weber replied gently, "but it's extremely difficult to prove incompetence when you're clearly capable. Still, they've hired a psychiatrist and gathered witnesses. This is serious." He handed me the court documents. Among the claims, I'd become paranoid because of the security cameras. I hoarded medications. I took only vitamins. I refused medical care. I'd simply declined their chosen doctor. And worst of all, I'd been manipulated by outsiders, meaning Eleanor, Mr. Weber, and my new friends. They'd twisted every act of self-preservation into proof of mental decline. "Who are their witnesses?" I asked, voice trembling not from fear but fury. "Lena, of course, a neighbor across the street, Mr. Davis, who's never liked you, and your pharmacist, Mr. Green." That last one stunned me. Mr. Green had known me for 20 years. He'd always been kind. We went to the pharmacy that afternoon. When I asked him about the statement, his face flushed crimson. "Mrs. Richter, Lena came in weeks ago. She said you were acting confused and asked about your prescriptions. I told her you only buy vitamins, but she insisted that meant you were neglecting your health. Then she showed me a form saying I confirmed irregular medication use. I thought it was for insurance. I had no idea it was for court." He was horrified. He wrote a new affidavit on the spot, clarifying everything. Mr. Davis was harder. He stood on his porch, arms crossed. "You are acting strange," he snapped. "Cameras everywhere, screaming at your family, letting strangers into your house at all hours." "Those strangers are my friends," I said calmly, and I screamed because my son and daughter-in-law broke into my home to steal my documents. "Would you stay quiet if that happened to you?" He had no answer, just a glare. But his testimony would be weak, superficial, emotional, not factual. Back home, Mr. Weber laid out our defense. Get an independent psychiatric evaluation from a neutral expert. Gather character witnesses, Eleanor, Cynthia, Mr. Summer, my new friends. Document every lie they'd told and prove my financial competence. The next day, I met Dr. Moore, a geriatric psychiatrist with silver hair and eyes that saw right through pretense. For 2 hours, she tested my memory, reasoning, emotional stability, and financial literacy. At the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Richter, your cognitive function is excellent, well above average for your age. You're not just competent, you're remarkably clear-minded." Her report would be our shield. That evening, Eleanor called an emergency meeting of our Garden Club warriors, as we'd started calling ourselves. Maria, Carmen, Alfreda, and Cynthia gathered in my living room. When I told them about the lawsuit, Maria slammed her teacup down. "We'll testify." "Every one of us. Anyone who's spent 5 minutes with you knows you're sharper than most lawyers." Alfreda, at 80, took my hands. "Renata, this isn't new. For generations, greedy children have tried to lock away their parents to get their money. But you've got something they didn't. Proof, allies, and courage." I cried that night, not from fear, but from grief. I was mourning the son I'd believed in, the dream of a loving family, the illusion that my love had ever been enough. But from that grief rose something stronger: resolve. The trial date arrived 3 weeks later. I wore my best black suit, the one Robert loved, and pinned a small sunflower brooch to my lapel. For the life I'm reclaiming, I thought. The courtroom was cold, sterile. Max sat stiffly in a new suit, bought with what money, I wondered. Lena wore black like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. The funeral of her financial lifeline. Their lawyer opened with a performance worthy of a soap opera. Your Honor, Mrs. Richter has undergone a tragic mental decline. She's isolated herself from loving family, installed surveillance like a paranoid recluse, and fallen under the influence of opportunistic neighbors. Every word was a lie wrapped in legal velvet. Then came their witnesses. Lena sobbed on the stand, calling me like a second mother, and claiming my hostility broke her heart. But under Mr. Weber's cross-examination, her story crumbled. When was the last time you called Renata just to ask how she was, without asking for money? Silence. Is it true you told her only special people were invited to your wedding? Her face turned scarlet. Max fared worse. How much money did you receive from your mother in 3 years? I don't recall. Does $33,400 sound familiar? He looked at the floor. She was generous. And how many times did you visit her without asking for help? Another silence. Deafening. Mr. Davis claimed I was erratic, but admitted he'd never spoken to me directly. Dr. Lehman, their hired psychiatrist, claimed my refusal to see him proved incompetence, but Mr. Weber produced Dr. Moore's report. Flawless cognition, full awareness, sound judgment. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green testified he'd been misled. Mr. Summer confirmed I'd changed locks and canceled transfers with perfect clarity. Eleanor described my transformation. She went from broken to radiant. Cynthia added, she's the most present person I know. She remembers everyone's birthdays, asks about our lives, listens like it matters. Finally, I took the stand. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. Mr. Weber guided me through the story. The wedding, the $33,400, the lawyer's intrusion, the threats. Then he asked the question that mattered most. Why did you stop supporting them financially? I looked straight at Max and Lena, because I realized they didn't love me. They loved my money. My presence was tolerated only as long as my account was full. When I chose myself, they called me crazy, but choosing yourself isn't madness, it's sanity. Their lawyer tried to rattle me. Aren't you lonely now? I'd rather be alone than used. Don't you miss your son? I miss the boy he was. But the man he's become? Number. That man tried to steal my freedom. When I stepped down, I felt lighter. I told the truth, not just to the court, but to myself. Closing arguments were swift. Their lawyer painted me as a victim of manipulation. Mr. Weber countered, Your Honor, this isn't about incompetence. It's about accountability. Mrs. Richter finally said no to abuse, and her family is punishing her for it. Judge Miller retired to deliberate. 2 hours passed like 2 lifetimes. When he returned, his voice was firm. The court finds no evidence of mental incapacity. Professional evaluations confirm Mrs. Richter's full cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, while painful to her family, are rational, documented, and well within her rights. He paused, then added, Furthermore, the evidence strongly suggests this petition was motivated by financial interest, not genuine concern. The request for guardianship is denied in full. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I simply exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years. As we left the courthouse, Lena shot me a look of pure venom. Max wouldn't meet my eyes, but I didn't care. I'd won more than a case. I'd won back myself. That night, Eleanor threw a celebration at my house. Wine, laughter, sunflowers in every vase. Elfrida raised her glass. To Renata, the woman who chose herself and discovered she was enough. And for the first time in decades, I believed it. 3 months after the trial, I sold my house. The one Robert and I had built together. The one where I'd raised Max. The one that had witnessed both my greatest joys and deepest betrayals. It wasn't easy to leave, But staying would have meant living in a museum of illusions. Every room echoed with the ghost of the mother I'd been, the one who gave until she had nothing left, who believed love could be earned with money, who mistook silence for peace. I moved into a bright, modern apartment in the heart of the city, just 2 blocks from the art studio where I now take weekly painting classes. My new place has floor-to-ceiling windows, a balcony with potted sunflowers, and no room for guilt. With half of what remained of my savings, money I'd fiercely protected after the trial, I made a decision that brought me more joy than any gift I'd ever given Max. I donated it. Not to a distant charity, but to a local nonprofit that supports elderly victims of financial abuse. The director, a woman named Dr. Patel, cried when I handed her the check. "This will fund legal aid for dozens of seniors," she said. "You're giving them a chance to reclaim their dignity, just like you did." "Then it's the best investment I've ever made," I replied. "The other half? I spent it on myself, not recklessly, but with intention. I booked a solo trip to Portugal, the country Robert and I had always dreamed of visiting. I walked the cobblestone streets of Lisbon, ate pastel de nata by the sea, and sat in quiet cafes writing in a journal for the first time in decades. No one called me for money. No one expected anything from me. For the first time in my life, I existed without conditions. Back home, Eleanor and the Garden Club Warriors threw me a rebirth party. Alfreda gave a toast that still lives in my heart, to Renata, the woman who looked into the abyss of betrayal and chose to build a bridge back to herself. I never heard from Max or Lena again. Not a call, not a letter, not even a social media message. But through a cousin, I learned they'd moved into a smaller apartment, far from the neighborhood they'd once bragged about. Lena had taken a job at a retail store. Max was working overtime at his engineering firm. Part of me felt a flicker of sorrow, but another part, the stronger part, felt something else: hope. Maybe, just maybe, adversity would teach them what my endless generosity never could, that dignity comes from self-reliance, that love cannot be bought, and that a mother's worth is not measured in dollars, but in boundaries. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and violet, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the one who canceled her own dreams to fund someone else's comfort, the one who believed she had to earn her son's love, the one who cried in silence after being told she wasn't special. That woman is gone, not because she died, but because she woke up. I am 72 years old. I paint. I travel. I laugh loudly with friends who see me. Not my bank account. I wake up each morning asking not what do they need, but what do I want? And that question, simple, sacred, revolutionary, has changed everything. If you're reading this and you've ever given until you had nothing left, if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, if you've ever confused obligation with love, know this: you are not broken, you were used. And it is never too late to choose yourself. I didn't just win a court case, I reclaimed my humanity. And in doing so, I discovered the most profound truth of all. The most important person I will ever love is me.